All right. Okay, so yesterday we're learning Daf Hema Beis today. So yesterday we learned that Rabbi Akiva said that the source for saying that half of Erev Pesach is prohibited in eating chametz comes from the fact that the Torah says you cannot do malacha on Yantif, and it also says you have to burn the chametz. So obviously you can't be burning the chametz on Pesach itself. Must be you're burning it before Pesach. So from there we see that when it says B'yam Rishon Tashbisu, that on the first day you should destroy it, you should burn it. That is referring to Erev Pesach, not Pesach itself. So, all right, let's see. Hold on. So Amar Rava, we're about to start the top of Amud Beis. Amar Rava, Rava says, Shmamina Rabbi Akiva Tlas. We learn three things from Rabbi Akiva. Shmamina ein bir chametz elasreifa. First of all, we see that Rabbi Akiva holds the only way to fulfill bir chametz is through burning, because, as you mentioned, otherwise there'd be no proof. Because maybe you could just get rid of it some other way. You could throw it down the toilet. So obviously, the only way to do bir chametz according to Rabbi Akiva is through burning, and therefore it would be a contradiction to say you have to burn it, and also not allowed to do malacha on the first day of Pesach. And number two, Shmamina havara l'chalik yotzes. Secondly, we have a machlekes in regards to Hilchos Shabbos, where the Torah says don't do any malacha and don't light a fire. What's it doing that for? If it says don't do any malacha, of course you can't light a fire. That's one of the malachas. So there are two opinions. Rav Nassan says that it's l'chalik yotzes. That means that the reason the Torah specifies that is to tell us that each malacha is considered its own prohibition, and therefore, if a person were to do multiples, he will get separate penalties for each one. And you don't say it's just all one big thing, and therefore there's one big penalty. That's l'chalik yotzes. And the other opinion says it's l'lav yotzes. It tells us that it's not treated like a regular malacha. Rather, it's treated like a regular lav, a regular prohibition in the Torah, not like one of the 39 malachas of Shabbos. So the Gemara is saying that we see here that Rabbi Akiva must hold that it is considered like one of the regular malachas of Shabbos. It's not considered a simple prohibition like any other, but it's considered a Shabbos prohibition, and therefore he would say that there would be a problem with doing that on Yantiv. Now there is some discussion here in the Rishonim as to exactly what the connection is there, because either way it would seem it's still prohibited. So why does it matter if it's a Shabbos prohibition or it's just a regular level prohibition? Why should that make a difference? So there's a couple of answers. So Rashi says it's just because of the wording of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva's words were, we find that burning is an av malacha. It's one of the main 39 malachas. So that is just, that wording seems to imply that it's not just a simple law, but it's actually a Shabbos level prohibition. And Taisus also mentions that. And then there's another opinion that Taisus brings from the Riva that he explains more in Bea, that there is that if you hold that it's l'lav yatzes, that means that the prohibition against lighting a fire on Shabbos is not a regular Shabbos prohibition, but it's a lower level, just a lav, then on Yantif it would actually be allowed. And from here, clearly he's saying it's not allowed at all. So certainly that would be another option. And then thirdly, we have the Rabbeinu Chananel on the side of the Gemara. The Rabbeinu Chananel says that the idea here is that in order for there not to be a conversation about esei doichel esei, meaning that a positive overrides a negative, which generally is the rule, that rule does not apply if the negative carries a severe penalty like kares or the death penalty. So in this case, if you would say that it's l'lav yatzes, meaning that lighting a fire is not a Shabbos level prohibition, but it's a lower level prohibition, then it wouldn't carry a death penalty. If it doesn't carry a death penalty, then you should be able to do it in Yantif because you have a mitzvah of burning the chametz, and the positive overrides the negative. So it must be, says the Gemara, that no, Rabbi Akiva must hold that it's l'chalik yotzes, which means it does have a regular Shabbos level prohibition, which means it does carry a death penalty, which means that the positive will not override it. So those are the three options as to exactly how we see from this statement that Rabbi Akiva holds that Havara is l'chalik yotzes, that it's still a full Shabbos prohibition. Okay, and then Ushmamina, and thirdly, we see from Rabbi Akiva, lo yamin hayil. We don't say the concept of hayil, which is hayil v'hutra Havara l'tzerich, hutra namishla l'tzerich. Since, the word hayil means since, which is a concept that since something has been permitted under certain circumstances, we should permit it across the board. So there's a lot of discussion in the Gemaras throughout a couple of places in Shas whether or not we say that principle. Do we say Hayil or not? So we see from this Rabbi Akiva that we don't say Hayil because we know that you are allowed to light a fire or burn, I should say. You're allowed to burn things for a food need on Yantif. So from the fact that we're seeing over here that doesn't allow you to burn when it's not a food need, such as burning your chametz, which is not a food need, that's a totally separate idea altogether. So from the fact that he doesn't allow that must mean he doesn't agree with Hayil. Because Hayil would say once burning is allowed, you can do it for anything you want, whether it's a food need or not a food need. So from the fact that Rabbi Akiva still holds us prohibited over here must mean that he does not agree with the concept of Hayil, and therefore it's not allowed because it's not a food need. Okay, good. A carbon, there are only certain carbonates that can be brought, and there's a special pasuk that allows for that.
It has to be
I'm sorry? No, that's the whole point. The whole point is that over there it says it has to be b'mayada. It has to be at its proper time. And that's how we learn that it overrides Shabbos and Yom Tov. But we don't have that. We don't have anything that tells us that this should override. On the contrary, we're seeing that it means the day before, and it doesn't override.
Or Chol but not.
Yeah, but that wasn't his question.
Yeah, but
right.
That's when it can override. Is when it's not overriding.
Well, then it's not overriding because then it's not prohibited.
Right.
Okay. Tana Rabbanan, the Gemara continues, and then the Brisa says as follows. Let's get the psukim straight over here. This is very the psukim get a little bit complicated. So let's get it. Shivat yam sa'ar lo yimatzu b'beteichem. The pasuk says that for 7 days you should not have chametz. Now, we will differentiate between sa'ar and chametz, but for now I'm just going to keep them all the same because for our Gemara it doesn't matter. So sa'ar means leavening, so we're just going to call everything chametz. So pasuk says for 7 days you should not find chametz in your house. Mal Tamalamer, why does it need to say that? But like for Nemar, lo yira l'chasa or lo yira chametz. Pasuk says you shouldn't find any chametz b'chol gulecha on all of your boundaries. So why does it also need to say you shouldn't have chametz in your house? So the Gemara says lefish and Nemar lo yira l'chasa because the pasuk says you should not find for you any chametz shalacha'i ataraya. That would sound like it's only yours that you can't see. Aval ataraya shalachirim v'shal gavaya. But if it's someone else's or it belongs to hektish, then you would be allowed to see it. There'd be no issue. And that's what the pasuk is coming to teach you. Now, Yachal, therefore I would think, Yatmin, that you could just hide it. You stick it in a closet, close the door, now you can't see it, so there'd be no issue. Or Vikabel Pigdanitz Minanachri, you can accept it as you're holding on to it and watching it for a non-Jew. So it's not yours, or if you can't see it, then those things should be allowed. So therefore the Torah has to say, no, you should not be found at all. Meaning, it shouldn't be found whether it's yours or not yours, and whether you can see it or not see it, it shouldn't be found. Okay. Brisa continues. This is only true, meaning I would only understand this to be true in a case where this non-Jew is not under your jurisdiction and he doesn't live in your courtyard. He doesn't live with you. However, how do I know that if this is a Gentile whom you are in control of, or he lives in your courtyard with you, how do I know that that's also true? The pasuk says should not be found in your house, means at all. So this Gemara needs explanation because it seems to be the opposite. As Rashi explains, this is really illogical because the Gemara is saying here that we're saying the only time there's a prohibition of that the pasuk is coming to teach me that you cannot have the chametz even of a non-Jew. Now, the Gemara says, well, I would have thought that's only for a non-Jew that you have nothing to do with. But if you do have something to do with him, then it should be permitted. Well, that doesn't make sense. It should be the other way around, right? If you do have something to do with him, that's more of a reason for it to be prohibited for you to have his chametz. If you have nothing to do with him, that's more of a reason to permit it because you have nothing to do with it. But where you do have something to do with it, it would seem to be the opposite of what the Gemara says. So the Gemara will address this later. But just to be aware, we do have to understand this part of the Brisa because it doesn't seem to make sense. Okay, so the Gemara now, the Brisa now continues. Now, so far the pasuk said if it's in your house. So I know only chametz it's in your house. But how do I know if it's in your cisterns or your pits or caves or other areas of your property that's not your house? How do I know that's also a problem? So that's why the other pasuk tells us in all of your boundaries, meaning anywhere, not just your house, but anywhere that's under your jurisdiction. Okay, now The Brisa continues. And still I could say, that when it comes to being in your house, that's when the Torah says, it shouldn't be seen, it shouldn't be found. And also, we learned that this means you cannot hide it, meaning even if it's not visible, and also you cannot accept it from a non-Jew. But begavulin, but when it comes to the rest of your property, meaning not your house, but outside your house, then I only know that you can't see your own chametz. But I should be able to have someone else's chametz or hektish's chametz or anything like that, because the pasuk that says gevulin, meaning the rest of your property, not your house, doesn't say anything about anybody else's. It only says lecha, whatever is yours. So that means that as far as outside of your house, it should only be a problem if it's yours. So from where do I know that all the rules that apply to one apply to the other? And the same way it's prohibited, even if it's not yours in your house, it's also prohibited, even if it's not yours out of your house. The Talmud Laimar, the pasuk says, "Sa'ar l'gzera shava." We have the word "sa'ar" twice, and that's teaching us "gzera shava," which is what the Gemara explains. Namar sa'ar bebatim. The pasuk says "sa'ar chametz" regards to houses, as it says "sa'ar li'matzah bebatechem." Do not find any chametz in your houses. But namar sa'ar begvulin, and it also says "sa'ar chametz" in regards to the areas outside of your house, as it says, you shouldn't have any, no chametz should be found. So ma sa'ar ha'amar bebatim, just like the chametz that said in regards to the houses, the following rules apply. That you cannot see it, you cannot have it found, you cannot hide it, you cannot accept it from a non-Jew. So av sa'ar amar begvulin, so too the same sa'ar, the chametz, that it says in regards to the other places that are in your jurisdiction but out of your house, we're going to say the same rules apply. All those same rules will apply equally. Okay, so that's the Gzera Shava taking it one direction, meaning the same way in the house it can't even be anybody else's, and even if it's hidden, so too out of the house it can't be even anybody else's, and it can't be hidden. Now we're going to go the other way too. Gzera Shava is typically go both directions. When it comes to the chametz of the out of your house areas, that we say specifically if it's yours, but if it's someone else's, it's okay. So too in the houses, it's only a problem if it's yours. It's not a problem if it belongs to somebody else or it belongs to Hek. Now, this is also a very big problem because we literally just said two opposite things. We said first it applies to only yours. First we said it applies even if it's yours and even if it's not yours. And then we said the other pasuk is telling us that no, it's only if it's yours, but not if it's not yours. So the Brisa has just contradicted itself twice. Once in the very beginning and now once again at the end here. And the Gemara will address each of these as we go through it. So let's take a look. Amar Mar. So we just said, we only know that there's an issue of having the chametz of a non-Jew if this non-Jew is not under your jurisdiction at all and he doesn't live with you. But a non-Jew whom you do have jurisdiction over, or he is living with you, how do I know that's also a problem? It should not be found. The Gemara says, Klapi lie. What direction is this going? This whole thing seems to be very backwards, as we asked the question earlier. So Amar Abaya says, Epoch. We actually are going to switch it around, meaning to say that the Gemara is saying that we're flipping the cases of the Brisa. The case of the Brisa should be as follows. I would think that the only time there is a problem of having the non-Jew's chametz is if he's a non-Jew that you do have jurisdiction over and he is connected to you, he is living in your property. That's when I would think there is a prohibition. But I would think there's no prohibition if he's not living with you or he's not under your jurisdiction. And therefore, I would have think that would be okay. So that the pasuk comes to tell me that no, lo yimatzah means it cannot be found at all. It just can't be found regardless of if you have any connection to this Gentile or not. That's Abaya's answer. Makes it very simple. Just flip the cases of the Brisa around. Everything works. Rava says, no, we don't have to switch it around. We can keep the Brisa as is. But really, it's actually going on the very first thing the Brisa said, which was that the pasuk says you should not have any chametz that's yours, which means specifically yours. But if it's someone else's, then it's okay. Now, to that, the Brisa comments, "Ainli ela b'nachish like yibashta v'en shrei mecha b'chatzer." That might only be true with a non-Jew's chametz that you have nothing to do with. That's whose chametz is, and that's whose chametz you can have because it's not yours. But nachish kibashta
In your house.
in your house, yeah. But nachish kibashta v'shrei mecha b'chatzer minayin. But how would I know that if a non-Jew that you do have jurisdiction over, how do I know that you could even have his chametz in your house, even though he's under your control or he's living with you? So to that, to that the pasuk says no, it simply should not be found at all. Okay, so now the Gemara says, "Oh, wait a minute. The high Tana Mahedra Ahatera." According to this approach, the Tana is looking for a heter, meaning he's trying to figure out how do I know that a non-Jew, even if he's under your jurisdiction, you still are allowed to have his chametz in your property. And what happens? Menasiv la kra isura, and the pasuk says, "Oh, lo yimatzah, you cannot have it." What do you mean? We're looking for a source that says you could have it. So why are we saying here we're looking for a source that says there's no problem with having it, and then we bring a pasuk that says there is a problem with having it? That seems to again be very counterintuitive. So to that the Gemara answers because the pasuk says it's for you, meaning you should not have chametz that's yours twice. Meaning the first time it says l'cha tells me that it's only a problem if it's yours, and if it's a non-Jew's it's okay. And to that I would understand that means if you have nothing to do with it. And then we have another time where it says l'cha, which tells me that even if you do have jurisdiction over this Gentile, or even if he is living with you, still the only problem is when it's l'cha. It's only a problem to have the chametz if it's actually yours, and not if it's not yours. That's why it says it twice.
But that we do today when we sell to John, it's not a
No, not at all. Not at all. We'll get there. We'll get there. All right.
Not ours.
We will continue from here. It's Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.